So Woody, as Vanessa mentioned, was our director of design until about a week ago, and is in about a week or two going to become a lead designer at the AIDS Foundation. So he's left us for someone who's a good friend of ours. So,
Uncle Bill.
Uncle Bill, who is, we're discovering is, like many people, very problematic.
No comments. Yes. How many of you are software programmers? Perfect. How many of you are designers? Perfect. I am just like John. He always calls himself a fake designer. I'm actually a really good fake designer. You see my sketches, they're horrible. But I have a really great team that is able to help me foster what we're doing here. And so I want to talk about the design manual, which dives a little bit into everything we do at Sage, whether it's consent, building apps, helping fix all the mistakes that Apple's research kit has done. So I'm not going to hold any bards. So as many of you software programmers know, in the 60s there was big issues where everyone was writing code over and over and over, not making patterns. They couldn't keep up. So they could actually hire more engineers, or they actually become smarter and actually started making components and patterns and making reusable things. This is probably how all software is done now, where you have different packages you load all the time and run them. Today, in design and in digital healthcare especially, we make bespoke apps. When I joined Sage 3.5 years ago, we loved making bespoke apps. We made Empower, there's probably asthma study that happened out in Mount Sinai, Stanford's app. They're all very similar because you used Apple's research kit, but they all are trying to be unique and special, and they all use different patterns. But how do we speed this up? I was a team of one for a while and going crazy. We could hire more people. I could work faster, which is sometimes good. I don't really like to work more than 35 hours a week. Don't tell my boss that. Or we can borrow from CS people and start building patterns and working faster that way. And so that's kind of what we did. We borrowed patterns from this guy named Brad Frost, who is a developer / designer. He actually shaped this in a really interesting way for biologists, where if you think about it, you have atoms, molecules, organisms, and you start having pages. This is kind of how CS people think, and frame this way to a bunch of scientists at Sage helped me kind of sell this. And so why a design system? As I mentioned already, it makes it more efficient, more scalable. If you look at all of our early apps, it was full of bugs, full of design issues. A lot of our buttons are off by a couple pixels. It made it really confusing, inconsistent, and looked unprofessional. So it helps us go faster, making reproducible components. We can actually share it with everyone else. It allows for cross-disciplinary collaboration. As you can see, as I work with Meg on consent, we can start sharing patterns there, with Vanessa on privacy toolkit. But also, it could potentially help scientists get better data, because people can actually find stuff, and I'll show screens later on. It can also help people understand privacy and consent. So how do we get started? I'm going to run through this really quick, because I know lunch is coming up. We printed out all our designs and started realizing how many different patterns do we have for doing different things. We did a design audit. This is really embarrassing for myself and a couple of designers, where we're like, why the hell do we have 5 ways of clicking next? Why do we have 5 different ways of showing results? What's going on? No wonder our patients are confused. And then before we started designing, we created guiding design principles. And so how do we solve the right problem? How do we start building services and not just websites and one-app apps? How do we start designing for trust? So can we be ethical, relatable, and personable? Designers love making dark patterns without knowing it. We like to convince people to click on things, like Facebook's thumbs up. It's really awesome, it's really exciting, but it's kind of like a dark pattern. So how do we also understand the users? So sometimes I'm not the patient. I don't have Parkinson's disease, I don't have MS, so it's really hard to understand their stories. So we have to actually understand them and have them tell their stories and actually understand their pain points. But we also have to do the hard work, so our users don't have to. A lot of the early apps were making patients do the hard work, and this is partly why a lot of patients dropped off. When we have to keep iterating. It's not about being consistent, or it's not about being uniform, but it's about being more consistent. And then this is the thing I always harp on with everyone at Sage. We need to be accessible and inclusionary. Yes, readability is awesome. Yes, legibility is awesome, but we also have to make sure that people can actually read it and see it. A lot of the apps in the early days are at 12-point font and this very fancy San Francisco font, and a lot of older people who are 35 and older probably can't read it anymore. But we also have to think about agnostic devices. So you don't have to just stay on iOS. You can look at Android. You can also look at web and stuff like that. And so creating the design system, we started with the color palette. It won't bore you. But we had to make sure it was actually accessible. People can actually see it, especially with the fonts on top of it. So all of these are actually AAA accessibility rules. We also started playing around with all these fonts and make sure they're actually legible by people. We test them with 80-year-olds and 70-year-olds. We actually put this into Sage Research Kit now. Same thing with the colors. And then this is only a spattering of our buttons and our components, but we started to reuse them. And so as you can see in the sticky footer button, that's just a copy of the primary button with the background. And so we started making these and started sharing them up with people. And then as you can see, you can start building upon them. As we learn more, as we do more studies, we start putting them into our system. And as you can start seeing, it's growing. So you can see how the atomic pieces were just the buttons. We start adding them, they're the molecules. We combine them, start being organisms, and now we start having the whole thing like finger tapping. If you guys are all interested, we have an open sourced design file that we share with everyone. This is kind of how you can use it. We can go in, go ahead and find anything. If there's something that's not there, you can make a comment. We'll actually draw it for you and add it eventually. And then testing with Empower. So I'm going to be very gentle with this, kind of, but not really. So Apple did this really great thing, what was it, 6 years ago, with Empower 1 and the whole research kit. That was the original one for finger tapping. It's very sterile, very clinical feeling. A lot of people, we tested this. I had students at UW do usability studies to help show us the issues. People were tapping on the finger tapping issues, on the finger tapping image instead of tapping next. But how we actually start telling what you need to do, how do you do it well, and then how we actually show progress. So they had no idea when they're going to be done. We said 2 minutes, but you had no sense of when you're going to stop. And so a lot of people stopped halfway through. And then the walk and balance is one of my favorites. So we had this gentleman. This is the screen for gait and balance. He had no idea how to start. He put the phone in his pocket without hitting start. He also left it on the table a couple times. You know, as a designer, I know you need to scroll because I see that little button there. But people who are a little bit older don't get it. But also the image of telling you how to do it is just a circle. It doesn't tell you anything of how to walk. And so we switched it. We start showing you right away how to animate, like an animation showing you this is how you're supposed to walk. And then we also add, like, see this in action so you can see someone actually doing it. Just like these little things that make it a little bit more accessible. And so we also guide people through. So learning from John and Meg's work on consent, could we do something very similar for all these assessments? Could we guide people telling you what you need to do? It's like first walk, make sure you have the volume up so you can hear it, make sure you're wearing pants with front pockets. Funny enough, this was designed by men who have pockets. But also we have to hint like, hey, if you don't have pockets, put in your waistband. And so this is a design manual that we transformed, guiding people how to use this, whether you're a designer, engineer, or even a researcher. We also tied in a user research toolkit as well, because a lot of people don't quite know how to do user research and usability studies as well. And so we started building out these pages like the color system, very similar to Google's and Apple's. What works, what doesn't work. Unlike them, we're an open system, so you can actually push into it. And you can make recommendations. You can actually add your own. And then we started sharing some screen templates, so you can see how surveys are done. You can see how different assessments are done, just like motor control and cognition ones. Next steps will be documentation and all that fun stuff. This will be continuing on. I'll be helping this while I'm at the Gates Foundation as well. And that's everything. Yeah.